Hello, hey, I am Rosie. I am your resident bridge walker and threshold guardian, aka the one swimming between the worlds and decoding the weirdness at the water's edge. Alright. I'm also water coded, which basically means the ocean and its stories won't leave me alone. So if you are looking for dry land logic, you might be in the wrong place. So today we are going deep, literally and symbolically, alright, into why why aquatic beings, is what I prefer to call them, and water spirit stories keep bubbling up in certain communities and what it all might mean. Let's deep dive. Do you know what? I really don't like having to do intros because I find them just so but I mean, I want to give the reason as to why I'm doing this, so all of that jazz. Okay, so now I'm gonna say it right now. I'm going to start saying some air quotes crazy sounding shit, some things that I'm going to be bringing up as possibilities. All right, everybody's welcome here, but if you really can't handle or accept hearing or reading about things such as interdimensionality, portals, click off right now. Click off if you're not into that kind of stuff, because I don't want people out here muddying the waters so that everybody else gets poo-poo dot. All right, this is what we're going to be talking about. We're deep diving into symbolic, esoteric, as well as regular schmegular stuff. And if that's not for you, that's fine, but just click off rather than trolling. Anybody else is welcome. Open-mindedness is what I welcome, because at the end of the day, no one has all the answers, but we all just have pieces of the pie. So suspend your imagination, leave your ego at the door, and put on your everything is possible slippers and step inside my liminal space. Step through the door of the portal that I am holding open for you right now. Let's go. I'm into all sorts. This channel, it's not just about mermaids, but this is the Mermaid Files, so that's what I'm going to be talking about. So I've noticed actually in all accounts of mermaids, because mermaids, I'll say mermaids now, mermaids or aquatic beings, but let's just say mermaid for this part. All around the world, I've noticed in all of the mythology, in all of the folklore, the stories can be quite similar. Sirens luring men to their deaths, mermaids sitting on rocks, etc., etc. Until you get to Africa and the Caribbean. I only came into these sorts of stories about 2 years ago, and I was shaken in a good way, because I'm the feel, the tone, the encounters of Caribbean mermaids is entirely different to the rest of the world, and Africa, I should say. It doesn't feel like you are walking in myth, fog, 1862 fishermen on boats that just see naked women in the water. It doesn't feel like that at all. It feels visceral. It feels real. It feels 2025. It feels modern. And I'm fascinated, so I specifically am thinking about Haitian stories, and I'm specifically talking about Jamaica. And if we go over to Africa, in Zimbabwe, South Africa, there are lots of encounters there, not to mention, if anybody's listened to the Tony Woods encounter, which took place in the Seychelles, Africa. But my point is that over there, it feels very much, that the tone is very much that these beings are real. These beings exist. These beings are not to be trifled with. There is so much nuance. But the undeniable bottom line ... factor in it is they are real. They exist. It is not folly, fancy, or fairy tale. These are beings that interact with people, whether it be good or bad, but they exist, and that is something that you do not see anywhere else. It's almost a case that if you don't believe, you're a fool, because what do you mean? This is common knowledge. This is a part of everyday life, and that is what I'm all up in there. I'm all up in that because that is pinging my codex. There is something about this that just is like, it's not regular schmegular 3D cut and dry mythos. There is a lot going on here. There's just so much. It is so rich. I am so fascinated beyond belief with it. And as somebody who walks between the worlds, yes, that is me. I do walk between the worlds, meaning that I'm somebody that sees what other people don't see. I am a bridge. I see, I decode, I seed. I'm a threshold guardian type person, so I do see things. And this video is more about, I'm getting this conversation started because this is something that I've noticed and I want to seed it into the collective, okay? The waters of the Africa, the Caribbean, and the Black diaspora is what I'm going to call, all right? Because the stories here, they cluster in a very different way. So the big question here that I want to pose is, what reasons could there be that make aquatic being / mermaid encounter sightings and encounters? What could it be that is making them happen in the way that they are in the Caribbean and in Africa? What is it? What could it be that is giving these particular places a completely different flavor of encounter? There are three things that I can think of, three kind of categories, which I'll mention, and then I'll break it down a little bit more. But go with me, let's see what we find here, and let me know what it is that you think too. A spiritual memory. The traditions never left, essentially, all right? There's unbroken mythic and cultural lineage around the water spirits. Mama Wata, La Sirene, Metlo. We go to Africa, we've got the Nomo with the Dagon, we've got Ymer, we've got Oshun. There's so many different beings. These are kept alive. They are present. It is not the past. That's one option. 2, interdimensional portals. If you think of an interdimensional portal as a thin place where reality bends, these coastal and equatorial and energetically charged waters, I believe there are portals there. To me, the Caribbean, no brainer. The Bermuda Triangle is just down the road, so to speak. There's a lot going on in these waters. Not to mention, water is a great conduit for spirit. On a paranormal type level, it is. Ever notice how a lot of strangeness goes on around water, or how sometimes water is involved in strange things like in hauntings or whatever? Water is a conduit for spirit to move through. And also, let's not forget that 90% of the ocean is actually undiscovered. So there's that. Third option of why these things are more visceral there. Colonial amnesia is what I would term that. So we've got European / American folk lost the living memory of these stories, or perhaps they demonized them with the increase in maybe Christianity or just in elf or whatever. So they're only interpreted through lens of legend and not living code anymore. All right. But this, when I think of all of those things, those are the reasons that I'm laying out that I think about. That brings up and conjures up a couple of interesting questions. So if I go back and think about the bit about the folklore and the colonialism that sort of cut off the living memory of these stories, this is where in my mind the intersection happens that I do get, that brings up questions and can be confusing. Because then I'm thinking, well then, are these beings independent and real, or are they responding to the collective consciousness thoughts of them? I'll explain what I mean in a minute. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, because if they were legitimate beings and individualized, it wouldn't really matter whether people remember them or not. Because they should just exist, right? They're just there, swimming away. But when we bring in the spiritual lineages and the reasonings of maybe why they're so viscerally seen in some waters and not others in that way, it almost makes it feel like it's been conjured up by thought, because it's something that's being held collectively, sort of like an egregore or a tulpa. It does make you think, right? Are they responding to resonance and coming through because people are thinking about them more and they are alive in the collective, in present? Or is it a case that in the Caribbean and in these African waters is naturally where these beings actually live? And because maybe the people that are living in these areas are more connected with their lineages and with their stories and with the traditions, that they're not effectively erased out of existence. The story still continues. So is it that in these areas, because these beings naturally just live there, people see them and it's being passed on orally and not bullshitted? So therefore, maybe it isn't that it's because of how people think, it's that maybe these beings are just allowed to be. Colonialization in itself is what is the act of going somewhere and erasing, so to speak, the peoples or the cultures that are already there and putting your own stamp on it. Maybe it is that the people that naturally live in the African communities, the Caribbean communities, they accept what is. They're not trying to erase it. They've allowed the memory to exist. So these beings could independently exist, but maybe they're seen more because it's just allowed to be. What do you think? So, just in case that was confusing, let me break it down before I go into the clear questions and patternings to think about. So, 1, are these aquatic beings, so to speak, individuated beings, or are they a part of a process, meaning resident energies? So, if they are real, independent entities, they exist with or without our awareness, just like dolphins, octopuses, everything else. So they might reveal themselves more in places where they're known, but they don't require belief to exist. All right, so that's one thread. Or are they resonance responders, like a thought form, an egregore, or a tulpa? Which means that these beings become more visible or they become more real when they are called by a strong enough field of belief, story, and cultural energy. So that basically means it's like if the collective, if everybody all believes something, you can almost bring that thought form into being, right? So in that view, the living memory then feeds and shapes them. So these are the two main thrusts when we're talking about, when I'm talking about this. So again, why the clustering in the black diaspora waters? So we've got on the left, in the red corner, they always existed in these waters, okay? And the oral and cultural tradition has just kept the portal open. The encounters are simply acknowledged, all right? They're not hidden, they're not ridiculed, they're not sanitized out by colonial Christian suppression. They just are. And then we've got in the blue corner, in the other hand, that the field of collective memory in these communities kind of acts like a bit of a tuning fork. All right, they're amplifying the wavelength of these, these beings need to manifest or to interface. So where belief and remembrance is strong, the veil is thinner. So the more you believe, the more you see. All right. So I think I broke that down a bit more clearly. So is it all just thought? Are we creating the experience we are having? What do you think? To me, no, I don't think we are creating the experience that we're having. So, because if it was all just collective imagination, I think that I would expect to see a lot more literal wish fulfillment encounters. I expect to see dragons. I expect to see unicorns. Not to say that I haven't, but I expect to see a lot more ish going on. All right. Why aren't there endless pink-tailed Madisons? Where's Madison out here? Why are there not more? Why are there not more all of these things and pixie-haired unicorns? Why these experiences that are reported often very visceral and sometimes scary, because nobody wants to see a scary mermaid. We all want the hook version, okay? So that kind of means that maybe we're not making it. It's not just being fluffed out of fiction. But also, it might not be entirely objective, because there's a feedback loop where culture and lineage holds memory and the beings seem to be more accessible. So where the memory seems to be broken, i.e. places where it's completely suppressed and thought of as bullshit, sightings do dwindle and become sort of cartoonish or feared. So that does play a little part in it. Also, as a side note, it's not really a side note, but I want to touch on this in another video, but I can touch on it a little bit here. Let's also not forget the transatlantic slave trade. The passage from Africa to the Caribbean, even to parts of the United States, is a passageway full of absolute trauma, heartache, horrors. Name it, you name it, it's in there. All right. And as an energetic imprint, it's very strong, not only in the waters, but also in the people, in Black people. I find it fascinating, and I do think that it's symbolic that mermaids or aquatic beings are close to the heart, or at least more believed, like I'm saying, in some of these places over maybe more European places. That to me is very symbolic for multiple reasons. That it is imprinted in a way in these peoples, in these places, not just in a positive way, but also a negative way. I've come into, I only the past 2 years heard about, see the marine kingdom, have heard the marine kingdom concept that really kind of makes, that more or less demonizes anything of the sea, anything under the sea. It is biblical in my understanding, going back to the sort of the Nephilim sleeping with the women of men concept. Therefore, anything that is born of that is an abomination type situation. That's not my belief, but I'm saying that the image of sea beings is strongly imprinted for multiple reasons, and the symbolism in it is very interesting. The transatlantic slave trade and the passage on the Atlantic Ocean. I've also heard people believe that some mermaids, or as they say, I say aquatic beings, are a result of slaves that were thrown overboard or jumped overboard, becoming one with the sea and, becoming a different race down there. I think that's symbolic. I think that's a good, like I said, I think that's a way to kind of make sense of, or to give some meaning, or to give some get some anger, or give some meaning to such senseless violence and just absolute disgustingness. Is the only way, I'm not even going to say it nicely, to something. To think that people that were shackled in handcuffs and taken against their will are able to outthwart their captors, and rather than dying in vain, actually transforming into something that cheats death and sees them carrying on. I think that on a subconscious level, that's very soothing. It gives a sense of some sort of justice rather than the disgusting, horrific tragedy that it actually was. So I can understand people having that point of view. Personally, I don't believe that happened, as in I don't think that slaves jumped overboard and morphed and evolved into mer beings or aquatic beings. I don't think that is what the case is, but on a symbolic level, it's powerful. So that is an aside, but I did think that it's important to note in the video, because I like to go through all layers. Please feel free to tell me what you think on that. So I don't know. I think they're both independent and relational at the same time. And that could be when some people say that they are living flesh and blood creatures, but they're also interdimensional creatures. So they exist on a frequency dimensional bandwidth that overlaps with ours, but it isn't actually fixed. Okay. But where there is living myth and memory, and it's not suppressed, but is actually held in belief, whether that's a ritual, whether it's a story of invocation, dreams, whatever, that world and this world have the tendency to overlap with more frequency, especially in places where that signal is strong, the diasporic, the indigenous areas. So the reality grid seems to be thinner, and the veil definitely seems to be more open in these parts. But I personally don't think, but they aren't created by belief. I believe that they do seem independent beings, but there seems to be a lot of nuance to it. So you can tune in, but you didn't make the radio station. What do you guys think? To conclude, so there's still no real answer, but we can speculate. I think that aquatic beings, all these mer beings, are both real, as in they exist with or without us, makes no difference. They're laws. But I also think that they're relational, as in they're more easily encountered where the living memory, myth and resonance are strong, and there's almost like an interacting, whether it be through the belief of the people or whether it be literal interacting through spiritual devotion or ritual. And so the people become attuned to it. I do. I really do. I still think that these are questions that are worth putting out there and just getting people thinking about the possibilities. So, like I said, that's why I said this video is more of a questioning deep dive. I'm seeding the question. I'm seeding this information for people to think about. Yeah. So we're going to leave it there, and I'll leave it with this quote. A God whose name is never spoken dies. A spirit who is never called forgets. A being who is never seen slips between the worlds until someone with eyes, like yours, like mine, remembers. And suddenly the portal opens again. Okay, guys, and with that, I'm going to love you and leave you. I'm going to walk out that door that I just opened. And I will see you in my next video. So let me know what you think. Don't forget to leave your comments below and subscribe to the channel. Happy swimming!